Is there anything I can do to thank you?" With those words from her, I took advantage and made a single request. When I told her what it was, she blushed slightly and looked down. Then she said quietly, "I have no reason to refuse." Her eyes were a bit moist, and her voice was trembling. "I am Mike Johnson, 30 years old. I'm laid back and also a ridiculously timid person. I've had opportunities for promotion at this age, but I'm not suited for management due to my personality, so I've turned them down. I'm happy to continue living peacefully as a regular employee. My parents back in rural Nebraska are rushing me to get married, asking if I found someone nice, but unfortunately, there's no one I would consider marrying, and I haven't had a significant other in a long time. The only thing that comforts me, a workaholic, isn't a woman, but the houseplants that are gradually increasing in my room. At first, I just wanted some greenery in my room, but as I placed the plants and took care of them, seeing them thrive, I realized it calmed my soul. Now my room is filled with plants. Taking pictures of the plants is also one of my joys. So, while it's not glamorous, my personal life is peaceful and my work is going well. However, there was a recent change at work. A female colleague named Susan Miller transferred to my department. Susan is 35, 5 years older than me. She has a good sales record and is rumored to be a rising star among her peers. In addition, being the most beautiful woman in the company is a well-known story. Beautiful and competent, she has it all, but for some reason, she isn't married. Maybe she's out of everyone's league, so the male employees can't even approach her. I won't lie and say I'm not interested. But we've been in different departments, and I haven't talked to her much. Like me, Susan seems to struggle with socializing. She gets her work done officially, but I've never seen her chatting with others. My coworkers also don't know how to approach her, so there's a wall between Susan and everyone else. As we'll be working together, I hope we can at least make small talk. That was during a usual weekend when I was admiring my houseplants at home. I was transplanting potted plants on the balcony when a single piece of paper fluttered down from above. I picked it up, thinking it was something, but it turned out not to be paper but a thin paper bag containing plant seeds. It probably came flying down from the floor above, but should I return it or not? While I was wondering what to do, the doorbell rang. I thought I knew who dropped the bag, so without checking who it was, I opened the door. But the next moment, I froze on the spot. It seemed the other person was the same, as we stood silently facing each other for a while. "Susan," to my soft murmur, the person in front of me answered yes. The one who rang my doorbell was my attractive senior at work, Susan, whom I had recently begun working with. Her hair, usually tied up at work, was loosely hanging over her shoulders. Perhaps because it was the weekend, and she was dressed in a relaxed dress, without her usual glasses. I dropped the bag of seeds and came to get it. "I had no idea that you lived downstairs," Susan said, seemingly surprised. "It's not unreasonable." I was surprised too. Such coincidences do happen, don't they? Later, Susan told me that she had moved into this apartment building 3 months ago. Since Susan and I had different off-duty times before transfer, we hadn't run into each other. And I tend to stay at home on my days off. While we were both surprised by the coincidence, I returned the bag of seeds to Susan. "Thank you so much. I'm sorry. I was planting seeds in the planters on the balcony and accidentally let the bag of seeds be carried away by the wind." I was glad to hear that, because I felt a sense of familiarity. I was also transplanting pots on the balcony. "You like gardening, growing plants too, Susan?" "Yes, I love houseplants and keep them in my room." "Oh, maybe that one is in my room too." Susan pointed at the small houseplant I had placed by the entrance. From there, we talked about the potted plants we were growing. I was surprised to learn that Susan lived upstairs, but even more surprised that she, who always seemed to put up walls and worked methodically, was talking so much and so lively. Especially when talking about plants, she had such a soft and gentle expression. Seeing her like that, I thought she was adorable. There seems to be a gap between her work and private life, and I think that's what attracted me to her. From that day on, Susan and I began to communicate privately as well. Although most of our conversation was about plants, but it was a lot of fun exchanging information about plant shops and growing methods through messaging. One day, she expressed interest in a large houseplant in my room, so I invited her over. Knowing that we were only going to talk about hobbies, I was still nervous to invite a woman into my room. As a thank you for inviting her, she brought some sweets. The way she can be so thoughtful makes her even more wonderful, I thought, and I probably had romantic feelings for her. I began to realize my feelings. I was staring absent-mindedly at Susan in my room when she muttered, "Camera. My SLR camera is sitting in my line of sight." I do a bit with the camera too. I take pictures of houseplants and post them on my blog. It's fun, and it's a way to connect with fellow plant lovers. "Really now?" She said that, but she seemed more fascinated by the plants in the room than the camera. After privately talking with Susan for a while, I suddenly received a request from a beautiful colleague. The beautiful colleague, of course, is Susan. "I'm going on a business trip for a month. Can you stay at my place during that time?" I was indeed puzzled by this. Just because we'd been talking more didn't mean I could stay at her place. Seeing my troubled face, Susan continued with a smile. "I'm sorry for springing this on you. I was half joking about the living part. You don't have to stay. But while I'm away, I'd like you to take care of my plants. Some can be left alone for a while, but others need frequent care. This is my first time being away so long, and I'm really at a loss. My parents live out of state, so they can't come help." I felt relieved upon hearing that. Apparently, she doesn't have friends she can casually ask to take care of them. I know what kind of plants she has in her room, and I understand how to take care of them. Plus, Susan's house is right above mine, so it's easy to get there. But isn't it careless to let a man into a woman's apartment? I thought, but she reassured me by saying, "You're the only one I can ask. I trust you." I was pleased with those words. It wasn't that she was asking just anyone, but that she trusted me specifically to ask for my help. She persisted, and in the end, I agreed. I did it because she was in trouble, nothing more. It's definitely not because I was asked by the beautiful colleague I have a soft spot for, looking up to me. The night Susan went on her business trip, I, who had been entrusted with the spare key, headed to her house. Entering a woman's home when she wasn't there was a first for me, and I was filled with trepidation. Inside the room, there were as many houseplants or more as in my room. Each leaf was lush, and the stems were strong. It showed that she was taking good care of them. Previously, Susan had mentioned that she collected a lot of books about plants. She had told me that I could look at anything on her bookshelf when I visited during her trip, so I immediately checked to see what books were there. That's when I noticed a handwritten notebook mixed in with the books. Upon flipping through it, I realized it was Susan's notebook summarizing the characteristics and care methods of her plants. From the number of books and the contents of her notebook, I could tell that Susan wasn't just fond of plants, but was studying them to take care properly. I've grown various plants, starting with houseplants, but I never really studied them in depth. But as I looked through Susan's notebook, I began to enjoy it, and I became engrossed in reading her plant books and her compiled notebook in her room while she was away on business. I learned many new things, and it was exciting to have knowledge pouring into me. It was interesting and stimulating for me. I thought I was just going to take care of her plants in her place, but I ended up enjoying thrilling days beyond my imagination. When Susan came back, she thanked me for taking care of them, but I told her that I should be the one thanking her. I learned a lot and had even more fun growing plants. Hearing my words, Susan gave me a soft smile. My heart raced at her soft smile, softer than I had ever seen. No, I should be the one thanking you, Green Man. When she said that, my heart skipped a beat. Green Man is the name I use when posting pictures of plants on my blog. I write about their features and how to grow them, almost like a diary. I started it just to keep a record for myself, but sometimes I get comments from fellow plant enthusiasts. I've been writing since I was young because it allows me to connect with people who share the same hobby. I had told Susan about writing the blog, but I hadn't told her that I write under the name Green Man. I wonder how she knew. As I was thinking this, Susan told me a story about something that happened at a company she used to work for. It was a so-called toxic workplace that imposed a harsh environment with bullying, unpaid overtime, and no holidays. Apparently, she became physically and mentally worn down because of it. That was when I discovered Green Man's blog. I've always liked plants but never had the time to grow them myself. The pictures of plants on the blog and the peaceful diaries of living with them were healing for me. I read it almost every day. I had no idea Susan had such a past. I've also been in a situation where I became depressed because my relationship with my boss at my previous company didn't go well. Growing plants was part of my therapy for depression. I was so weakened, I sent a message to Green Man on his blog, "Work is hard, and I don't have time to be healed by plants." And he replied, "Quit your job, and let's be healed by plants together." Hearing that, my memory came flooding back. I had indeed had such an exchange on my blog. Since she was talking about how hard it was to go to work, I couldn't see it as someone else's problem. I myself couldn't quit my job due to anxiety, but once I quit, I realized that both my mind and body were becoming healthier. There's no need to be crushed by the company, so if it's tough, it's better to get out early. That's what I thought. Back then, I was told by my parents and those around me to try a little harder, but no matter how hard I tried, the situation didn't get any better. The first person to tell me that I could quit was Green Man, and I was glad, and I felt really relieved. So I quit the company right away. I wanted to send a thank you message, but I left a dark message, so it felt awkward to send another one. But I'm really glad I quit my old job. It's all thanks to you, Mike. Thank you. No, I also wondered how the person who gave me that message was doing. It was you, Susan. I'm relieved. How did you figure out that Green Man was me? She seemed to have guessed by looking at the cameras and desk calendar when she came to my room. I hadn't noticed, but apparently, the things in my room and the desk calendar were often captured in the photos I posted on my blog. She still didn't seem to be sure, but when I wrote on my blog that I was taking care of a friend's plants for a month while she was on a business trip, that seemed to be the deciding factor. I'm grateful that she still checks my blog, but I feel a little anxious, thinking that a woman who has feelings for me is reading it. What if I wrote something strange? But other than that, I felt nothing but joy. A person who was troubled like me was able to move forward because of my words. And she has become a fellow plant lover. I felt that the fact that my blog, which started as a hobby, had become something I could push people to do, would give me confidence. I am so grateful to you. Thanks to you, I now have time to be healed by plants, and my days are very peaceful. Is there anything I can do for you? Anything you want? At those words, I jumped at the chance. I thought it was a chance to convey my feelings. I don't know if I'll have an opportunity like this to talk at length again. I want you to let me express my feelings. I like you. The time I spend with you feels good, and I was happy to see a smile that I don't often see at work. I'm glad you entrusted me with taking care of the plants, and I liked your studiousness. It made me recognize again that it's just like you. I want to date you, but I don't want to use the word thanks. So, if you don't want to, please refuse me clearly. That's my request. Susan listened to my confession with a surprised expression. But when she finished listening, she firmly responded, "Why would I refuse? It's more of a reward for me. since I feel the same way." Her cheeks were slightly red as she said this. I didn't care what I looked like. I was so happy I struck a victory pose. Seeing me, she burst out laughing. Our relationship was going well, and there were changes at work too. She had been consulting me about communicating better with her colleagues. It seemed that her shyness was the cause of the perceived barrier between her and those around her. So I suggested to her that we put some houseplants in the office and make it a talking point. I had heard before that colleagues wanted something green, something soothing in the office. With everyone's consent, Susan and I took the initiative to place and take care of indoor plants. The cool-looking Susan turned out to love plants, and she became very talkative about them. Colleagues started talking to her more often. Susan herself seemed to enjoy the conversations with others. Her smiles increased at the office, and I couldn't be happier. "Mike, you always push my back, thank you." Her smile, now, is my greatest comfort. I used to think that only plants could heal. I've found a comfort greater than plants, and I'm deeply and truly content.